Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Terrible Leader, where real leaders share the raw truth about the lessons they learned the hard way, so you don't have to. Join our host, Lacey Nelson, founder of Transcend Leadership Collective and former terrible leader. Every leader can become worthy of being followed if they are willing to put in the work. On this podcast, we share the messy stories and behind-the-scenes reality of what the work actually entails. We welcome you to this community of revolutionary leaders who believe honest communication, healthy conflict, and building cultures of acceptance, respect, and trust are not only possible, but non-negotiable for cultivating world-class teams. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Confessions of a Terrible Leader. I'm your host, Lacey Nelson, and let's not forget, former terrible leader. I am here today with a fantastic guest. Oh my goodness. I got her one sheet and I was like, wow, this person, I cannot wait to have a conversation. Her level of expertise and her experience, man, I'm going to let her spill all the tea about who she is. And we're really going to get into some great topics today. Welcome, Avery Thatcher, burnout prevention strategist and super nerd. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Lacey. I am very excited to be here.
Awesome. Listeners, and to my producer, Mary, I apologize. My vocal fry is probably going to be pretty bad today. I stayed up way too late last night, went to Pearl Jam, pretending I was a teenager and could just pop out of bed or even in my 20s, which I am not anymore, just pop out of bed and, do this thing with no consequences to my voice or anything else. So anyways, thank you all for your patience today. I want to talk about, this kind of lends itself. I have so many questions. You are positioned with your experience to really understand burnout. Can you give us the synopsis of how you got to become a burnout prevention strategist?
Sure. Yeah. So I started off my career as a registered nurse working in intensive care units across Canada. And I noticed really early on that the number one reason why adults found themselves there was because of illnesses and diseases that could be linked to chronic stress. So I decided to start diving into all of the things about stress and how it impacts our body and the effects of acute and chronic stress, and really pivoted to get out of the reactive side of medicine and more into our proactive side. And so I was teaching all of the stress management strategies that we hear about a lot, the meditation, the mindfulness, the yoga, the journaling, the art therapy, all of the things. And at the end of 2018, I experienced a very significant episode of burnout. And I was so frustrated because I felt like I was lied to, because I was doing everything quote unquote right, but I still burnt out to the point that I was sleeping 20 hours a day and was no longer able to function as a human. And it's left me now with multiple chronic illnesses and a disability that changed my life literally overnight. But being the super nerd that I am, dove back into all the research and was just like, what's the missing piece of this puzzle? So then I found it. And that's really what I talk about now, because burnout is not actually a stress management problem so much as it's an energy management problem.
Ooh, okay. Tell me more about that. First of all, I would like to just admit up front that I and many of our listeners probably highly identify with being an area I know that you speak on, being a high achiever that is just super good at pushing the boundaries. Hence, last night, me thinking 3 hours of sleep was going to be a good choice, or just deciding to do it anyway, knowing it probably wasn't. What are the words of wisdom that you have, or the understanding you have for us high achievers? And then I also know you speak to highly sensitive high achievers. So kind of a two-part question. What is a highly sensitive high achiever? How is it different? How is a highly sensitive person wired differently than someone who's maybe not so highly sensitive, but share that high achiever trait? And then, I'll let you answer that, and then I'll ask the second part of the question.
Okay, sounds good. So high achievers are really driven to achieve more. And often this comes from a childhood experience or a younger experience of needing to prove yourself to be able to receive the affection and love that you were looking for. And so this showed up for me. And it's not like my parents were doing their best. And all parents do their best, really, when you look back on it. But I remember very early on, you came home home with like a 94% on a test and they would say lovingly, where's the other 6%? And they would dig into it and help me figure out what went wrong and what I can do better next time. So it was always this not enoughness that I felt like I had to keep pushing myself towards. And so this is where perfectionism is also a really big thing for high achievers to deal with. And it either shows up overtly, which is what we typically think of perfectionism as, or covertly. And this is where, for me, I had the messiest room on the planet because it was so much easier to just not than to do and fail. So perfectionism often really is tied into that. And then also with the overcommitting, because once you're really good at whatever it is you're managing, I got to take on more because I need to keep proving myself. So those things are traits of a high achiever that could sabotage us. But really, these kinds of things, like you've hinted at, is not necessarily good or bad. It can just either serve or sabotage. So the high achiever can really do those kinds of things. Now, with highly sensitive high achievers, we feel the disappointment and letting people down. And when you set that boundary, how that really feels for the other person, it's just wired to land so much harder. And so we often then predict and start to like fortune tell for how a situation is going to go because we don't want to be feeling that other person's disappointment in us. So there's a lot more there. Then also we just feel more overwhelmed more easily by things that are outside of our control. So that also contributes to burnout in its own way. So the two together, again, it's not like it's a rah kind of space that keeps you down. It's just information. All of the things that we're encountering are information and something which we can do something about.
And when you say outside forces that are out of our control, hearing a lot of my own tendencies in your description, when you say outside forces that are out of our control, does that also include world events, doom scrolling? Is that included in that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Living in a capitalist society, that is, modern day capitalism has evolved and changed. Like, for example, the word priority was only pluralized after the Industrial Revolution. Prior to that, the Latin base of that word, here's the super nerd coming out, the Latin base of that word really translates down to first thing. And there could only be one first thing. But with assembly lines, with factory work, you are now responsible for more than one thing. So this is where multitasking really came from. And it just continues to perpetuate itself. And after the pandemic, people are trying to make up for lost time. Burnout is so much more prevalent because now we're trying to balance even more priorities, even though that word really only means one.
Yeah. We're also seeing the trend of maybe their business, because they were an essential service or they were in an industry that was one of the industries that thrived. Not many did, but there was some that absolutely grew. Amazon is an example. I mean, there's lots of examples. Zoom. When you think about those industries that just took off during the pandemic, and then they're now trying to and pushing their teams to maintain those margins and those productivity levels. And neither Amazon nor Zoom is a client. So I don't know, and I don't talk about my clients, but Amazon or Zoom, just for an example, but we're seeing, a lot of industries that really thrived are still trying to maintain those margins and pushing people to maintain that profit level instead of understanding or having the perspective of, we had a great run. It sucked for a lot of people. We hate what got us here. We benefited, and now we need to adjust our sales. We rode that high for profit, and now we're going to readjust. And I find that fascinating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, so capitalism really talks about growth, only growth, and really life moves in waves. We have to be able to allow things to rest, right? So it's learning to shift that mindset and really go back to a time where burnout was not as prevalent as it is now and looking at what can we learn from that time.
Can you elaborate a little bit for me on when you said it isn't so much, forgot the initial word you used, but it's managing energy?
Yeah. So burnout's not a stress management issue, that it's an energy management issue.
Yes. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So I usually explain this with an analogy. So imagine that you're sitting in a boat and the boat is full of holes, but it's okay because you've got a bucket and you've got a life jacket. And so the water is slowly pouring in and you're bailing yourself out with your bucket and everything's fine. But then the water continues to pour in and you start getting a little bit tired and you can't really bail that water out as fast and you start to sink, but it's okay because then your life jacket catches you. Yeah. So in this scenario, burnout is your life jacket, because burnout is a body's fail-safe mechanism. It protects you from failure. Your bucket are all of your stress management strategies, but they require energy to do them. And so eventually the water is pouring in way too fast and you just can't keep up with that. And so then you run out of energy and that's when you crash. So when we're looking at it from this scenario, we're not just trying to do more self-care. We're looking at what are some of these holes in the boat that I can either plug or slow the flow of stress into my life, because that's going to help you make sure that you have the energy to maintain the balance with all the stress that you have. Because with the way that our world is, our body's not designed for that kind of stress.
Right.
Our body, it's a design flaw. Our body is really meant to have that initial moment when something dangerous is coming at you, fight or flight your way to safety, and it turns off. But chronic stresses don't go away. And then as a leader, you keep getting more things piled on you because who else is supposed to do it? And then you've got to figure out, do I delegate it? Do I take it on? How much work is going to be to teach somebody how to do this? All of those things really kind of play into that.
That's really helpful. And I love that analogy of the burnout being your life jacket, like your body's flipping the switch of this is it. This is the last resort. You're going to hit the wall and fall apart, but it's really keeping you alive. It's doing its job.
Yeah.
So as leaders, definitely I have been through a period of burnout myself. I'm really good at dancing on the edge of it still, if I'm going to be honest, getting right up to the edge and going, oh, I know what this is. I'm right on the edge of this again. Here we are. What would you tell our leaders that are trying to figure out? Sometimes it just feels impossible to even figure out what are the holes. How do we figure out what those holes are that need plugged in our boats? And then secondarily, A, how do we take care of ourselves? And then B, how do we create cultures for our teams, especially in literal environments like manufacturing where there's an assembly line or, something where those pressures, you don't necessarily have control over stopping the way the work has to get done or redesigning it, but you certainly have the influence of and the ability to shape the culture of your team. So I guess 2-part question. How do you do it for yourself as a leader first? Identify the holes, and then how do you do that? And then how do you actually create a culture, especially in environments like an ER, like manufacturing, like farming, when it's go time, you can't really stop the flow.
Totally. So the first thing which I just want to help explain is that most people think of burnout as a circle. So you start at the top, you're in your little peak performance space, feeling amazing, and then everything kind of piles on, it gets to be too much, and then you come down and crash into burnout at the bottom. Life slows down, or it forces you to slow down enough that you start to recover some of that energy, and then you're back up to the top. But the truth is, it's more like a waveform, like a ball bouncing down a hill. So you start up really high in your peak performance space, and then you crash into burnout for the first time. You recover a little, but not as high, and then you crash down into burnout again. And then you recover a smidgen more, and then you crash into an even deeper burnout. And this is where we often hover. We get our head back above water, and then life knocks us down again, and we're back in burnout. And so what we need to look at is not just how do I feel functional again, but how can I work my way all the way back up those waveforms, back up to the top peak performance space. And so the reason why I want to share this is because when we look at burnout recovery, especially as a high achiever, we're just like, hey, I'm going to do all of the things. I'm going to get it right. It's going to be boom, and I'll be better. Great. Check. Oh my gosh. And so we really just need to find that middle ground and starting to look at, again, how is this going to serve me versus sabotage me? And so absolutely, when you're looking at, oh my gosh, everything, like the world's on fire right now. Everything is so stressful. Where do I even start to name all these holes in my boat? And this is where we're going to look at things in layers. So first off, just start listing all of the different things that you can think that are causing you stress that you can see right away. And the inner voice inside your head might be like, but what if the list isn't complete? What if I mess up? What if I write down something wrong? Just know this is the first pancake version, because the first pancake's always a little wonky.
Yeah.
So
yes, love it.
We're going to just figure out the first layer. And so once you have them all written down, then go through that list. And this is what I do when I do workshops for nonprofits and corporations, is we go through this list together and we say, okay, which are the ones that you can take action on and do something about? And which are the ones that you need to manage? Because you can't control inflation. You can't control society. You can't do some of those things. You can't control that this new huge order came in and you've got like a huge deadline to meet. So then we need to look at what are the things that we can just quickly action on and do something about. And then how can we manage some of these other problems, these other holes in our boat? And so when we're looking at that as a leader for the team, one of the most important things that we can do is lead by example, lead by visible example. Because if you're taking a 5-minute brain break in your office with the door closed or like not sharing that with your team, they don't see it. So they don't don't know it's happening.
Right.
There's this thing that we have, it's called negativity bias. It's another design flaw. It's where we just look around and we focus on all of the bad things. And it's a survival mechanism. It's a way for us to keep ourselves safe, but it also means that we're going to assume the worst until we see something to prove otherwise. And we can work on it. Absolutely. We can lessen the impact of that negativity bias, but the truth is it's just how we're wired. So when we as leaders are not showing and demonstrating how to find that balance, how to care for our energy, then everyone's going to assume that, well, they're working through the entire day and not taking any breaks and they're pulling long hours and I'm getting emails from them at 1 a.m. So I need to be doing that too. Otherwise they might let me go. Right. So that kind of openness is really, really important. It's not easy, but it's important.
Right. I love that. So walk your talk, but walk where they can see you.
Oh, beautifully said. I might steal that.
Please do.
I will quote you.
And I will also share. So given all of this, how do you really, if you're like, man, I got a team that I push, I know they get pushed really, really hard. And there are certain seasons where it's harder than others. How do I make sure that how do I try to make sure that I am not perpetuating burnout culture? So walk where they can see you kind of thing. Walk your talk, walk where they can see you. What other things do I need to be aware of if I were to say, man, my team's really stressed. I know we are in transition right now. We just had a merger. We've launched a million new things in the last 10 minutes. Everyone's working really hard. I'm trying to walk where they can see me. But what else can I be doing to help them to make sure that I am not perpetuating burnout culture unintentionally? I don't think any of us do it on purpose.
No, I don't think any of us do it on purpose for sure. And so one of the things that I think is the most impactful, because when we're looking at the burnout recovery journey, when it's those waves that we're climbing back up that hill on, there's 3 phases. There's the recover your energy phase, because if you're going to actually get better and do things to help you with your burnout recovery, you're going to want to do it. So if you have no energy, it's not happening. So we've got to start there, recovering your energy. And so within this space, energy is both simple and not simple, because it's either we have it or we don't, but we're also complex beings. So we have 4 different kinds of energy. We have physical energy, which is what we mostly equate our energy levels to. We have mental energy, which is our ability to make good decisions, to problem solve, to think outside the box, to innovate, be creative. Then we also have emotional energy. This is our ability to hold space for other people, to regulate our own emotional experiences, to be able to not be super irritable and say something and want to like eat it right back and be like, where did that come from? There's like a monster inside that said that. And then the last one is the fulfillment energy piece. And so there's 2 things that we can do with these energies to really help our team, especially if we feel like they're underneath a lot of pressure and stress. The first is the energy check-in. And so this is where we look at those first 3 kinds of energy, the physical, the mental, and the emotional. And we just start the day and be like, okay, so where am I at with these? Which one's really low? Which one do I have more of? And then planning your day based on that. And often when I share this for different teams, they're just like, well, I'm told what to do. I don't have control over that. And it's just like, but you do, because you likely have, and it's not always the case. And of course, there's always going to be exceptions, but you likely have some things to do over the course of a period of time, maybe a week. And so on the day that you wake up with very little mental energy and very little emotional energy, maybe don't start to solve all those complex problems or do the detailed problem solving or project management or whatever it is. Go for the lower hanging fruit, do the easier admin tasks, work with the energy that you have. And so one of the things that a leader can do then is lead that check-in, just to be like, hey, everybody together, quick huddle, where are we all at? Who's low and what? And see what we can do to support one another. Because for example, in this one organization that I worked with, they work with children with special needs. And if you're really low in emotional energy that day and somebody sees you with a child that's having a tantrum, maybe they'll come in and help support you because they know that you're going to need some extra support, right?
Yes.
Having that open conversation is also really important. Now, for the other kind of energy, the fulfillment energy, this one is really, really vital, because if we're not feeling connected to that higher purpose, like what we're doing matters, like we're making a difference, it can just drain all those other batteries out. But if you have a lot of fulfillment fulfillment and we're feeling like we're making a difference, it can also pull some of those other energy levels up. And so back in the space race, when everyone was trying to get up into space, into the moon and everything, a reporter was heading to NASA to interview all of the astronauts. And he was waiting there in the lobby and saw a custodian coming by, just emptying the garbages and sweeping up and stuff. And he was just like being all cheeky, walking up to him, was like, hey, what's your role here at NASA? And the custodian looked at him and he was like, getting people to the moon, because he knew that by emptying the garbages, by cleaning up, that he was supporting the astrophysicists and the calculators and all of the different team members to be able to do their job best. So when we look at our team that is completely stressed, they're in this really difficult time where like they're getting slammed, helping them connect it back to the greater mission is so valuable.
Yes.
So that way they don't feel like a paper pusher or I just answer the phones.
Right.
They understand that their role has that greater purpose and they can connect back to that.
Yeah. I'm thinking too, it also is adjacently connected somehow to the bringing it back to one priority.
Definitely.
Bringing that mentally back to, instead of all of these, I'm thinking about our farmers, and they've got people all over the place. Farming is an extremely complex operation. And one thing I do appreciate immensely is that almost all of the people that we talk to across the board, no matter where they're at in the company, understand that they're feeding us. They are feeding America, they're keeping us safe and they're keeping us healthy. Not just America, the world. Because if we look at exports,
Absolutely.
I'm just connecting dots in my head to how all of this interplays. So thank you. Thank you for that. And oh my gosh, you clearly are an expert in your field. I am loving this conversation. And now I want to know, what is your mistake? The confession time.
Yeah.
You don't get to where you're at right now, usually without paying a pretty high price tag to have walked through some waters, ridden your own roller coaster. And I cannot wait to hear in your journey, what is the mistake that you came to share with us today? So welcome to the confessional. Step on in and let us know, what did you come to share today?
I love this part of it because, so I was on a podcast ages ago and they said that your story can become someone else's survival guide. And I was just like, oh, yes. So I love sharing my stories of where I messed it up because it's good information for me too. Yeah. So looking back, because hindsight's a jerk, I can see this playing through so many things, but it really comes down to the fact that I am a highly sensitive high achiever. And along with that comes people pleasing and wanting to make sure that everybody else is good. You're good. Everybody else is good. So I can see it in my role as an ICU nurse, when I was training new people, or when I was assigned this resource nurse position where you literally, for the 12-hour shift, you are running all over the unit, picking up little bits, doing things for people, running around and doing all the things. So it really is just making sure that no one else is experiencing stress and taking it all on yourself. And so in 2022, before I sold my marketing agency, I really wanted all of my employees to have zero to no stress because it was really, really important to me. And so I didn't want to overburden them. I didn't want to overdelegate. So whenever we had clients that needed last minute work done, I would do it. When we had difficult clients that were having, like 19 emails a day, I would respond. I would handle all of that. And really, I was trying to shield them all from that extra pressure. And I thought I was being a good leader, but instead, by trying to buffer things for my team, I was really just not showing up. It was unsustainable. I was getting irritable and saying those things that are coming out of my mouth. And I would often write an email and then need to wait on it and read it later and be like, okay, so we're going to soften that because that was a little rough. Also experiencing changes in my health again and just feeling fatigued. And then it really was, I was waking up one morning and I realized that I was dreading to go to work in a business that I designed. And I was like, what's up with that?
Yeah.
That's not a good fit. Something's up. Yeah. So that's where I slowed things down and took steps to change because it was really, the red flags were finally visible to me.
You could see them. They were like probably super huge and waving once you could see them, but the blinders came off.
Yeah. And I heard this ages ago and I wish I knew who said it first because it was on like a TikTok video and I scrolled on by and then I was just like, oh, dang, that's pretty good. But I lost it. So if you know who said this, please tell me because I would love to quote them.
All right.
But sometimes we can't see our red flags because they're pointed at us and it's a skinny little line. Yes. And so we need things to change the wind. We need somebody else standing beside us to see it and point it out because this is why hindsight's a jerk is because by the time hindsight's there, the wind has already shifted and we're like, oh, there they are.
Right. That's a 10-foot by 10-foot flag. So
right?
that was pointed at me. Yep. So thank you. And I think probably every listener is relating and nodding their head throughout this entire podcast. How has this shaped the way that this experience of having massive burnout, how has it shaped the way that you lead today in your work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So with the massive burnout that's left me with chronic illnesses and a disability and all of the things,
oh man,
it really forced me to redefine what high achievement means. Because before I defined, high achievement, those are the people that can do more things, they can achieve more, they can be noticed, they're like leaders and you can see them. But really, when I got down to what I saw high achievement as, it was the ability to create a ripple effect of compassion and just really openness that expands beyond my circle of influence. So when I look at that, it's not so much about how many things can I achieve, but what can I do to continue this ripple effect? And that has shifted completely of how I prioritize my workday, the one priority that I pick. Because I know that it's not all about the things. It's more about how do I get me and my team forward to create this ripple effect of compassion, to really show people that burnout is a symptom, but that it's really some of those internal beliefs that are causing it. So yeah, that's how it shifted for me.
I love that. Oh my gosh, so much insight. I personally am going to be re-listening to this and taking my own notes. This is just fantastic information as well as some really practical ways to apply it. Thank you so much. Last question before I wrap us up today. If you could go back to pre-burnout, Avery, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself that always do your best doesn't mean always be perfect. And that if I've got 40% energy to give that day and I give 40%, that's 100%. So really just stepping back into perfection doesn't mean an outcome. It means the effort. So to celebrate more of the effort.
Thank you so much. So many nuggets. I am just thrilled that you came to share your expertise with us today. Thank you. Where can all of us that are okay, now I need to listen to her a lot and I want more, where do we find you?
So you can find me on my website at becomingavery.com. I have a number of different free resources right away that you can start with, including a burnout risk assessment quiz where you can see where you sit in the risk of burnout. And of course, I don't say haha, you're in burnout. I give you ideas of what to do next.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. We are going to drop that link in the show notes and make sure people can easily find you. Avery, thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for so freely sharing your expertise and how you gained it, sharing the painful way that you got there. And you are just a gift to so many. And now I count myself and listeners among that pool. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for that. And thank you for this conversation. It was such a fun time. It felt like I've known you forever. It was so good.
Oh, well, good. Excellent. Likewise. Well, if you're up for it, I'm sure have you back in the future because I feel like we just scratched the surface. So fantastic. What an endless supply of conversation around this topic. So thank you. And listeners, until next time, go manage like a leader.
Thanks for being part of this community of revolutionary leaders who believe honest communication, healthy conflict, and building cultures of acceptance, respect, and trust are not only possible, but non-negotiable for cultivating world-class teams. If one-to-one coaching, engaging workshops, or strategic planning that is actually useful are anything that interests you, make sure to head over to transcendleadershipcollective.com to check out our free resources. Confessions of a Terrible Leader is hosted by Lacey Nelson and produced by Mary Scott. Music is by Leif Olson and Mary Scott from the band The Number of Months. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave us a review. And until next time, go manage like a leader.